There are some parts of a cemetery that feel wrong even in daylight. My name's Al, and I've been groundskeeper at Fairlawn Memorial for 11 years. It's honest work, mowing, trimming hedges, keeping the pathways clear, making sure families have a peaceful place to visit their loved ones. I know every section of these 60 acres, every oak tree, every bench. I know which graves get fresh flowers every week and which ones haven't seen a visitor in decades. I know the rhythm of this place like I know my own heartbeat. Row 9C is in the oldest section, tucked against the eastern fence line where the land slopes down toward the creek. The markers there date back to the 1800s, weathered limestone and granite, names worn smooth by a century of rain. Most of the plots haven't been touched in years. No fresh flowers, no wreaths, just moss and silence. It's the kind of place you walk through quickly, even on a sunny afternoon. I started noticing the problem on a Monday morning in late September. I was doing my usual rounds, checking for storm damage after a weekend of heavy rain, when I passed by 9C. One of the graves, about halfway down the row, was covered in fresh dirt. Not just a little settling, but a solid mound, like someone had been digging. My first thought was vandals, maybe kids screwing around. But the dirt wasn't scattered. It was neat, almost carefully placed. I filed a report with the main office, smoothed it out, reseeded the grass, figured that was the end of it. The next Monday, it was back. Same grave, same fresh mound of earth. I checked the burial records. No recent interments anywhere near that section. I asked the other groundskeepers if they'd seen anything. Nothing. I smoothed it out again, this time making a note of the exact plot number, 9C17. Belonged to someone named Eleanor Marsh. Died in 1923. No living relatives listed. Third Monday, same thing. Fourth Monday, same thing. By the fifth week, I was getting angry. Someone was messing with me. Had to be. I told my supervisor I wanted to stay late on a Sunday night. Keep an eye on the section. He looked at me like I was crazy, but said fine, just clock the overtime. I parked my truck up by the maintenance shed around 9 p.m., grabbed a flashlight and a folding chair, and walked down to row 9C. It was a clear night, cool, with enough moonlight to see the grave markers. I set up about 30 feet away, behind a large monument that gave me a good view of Eleanor Marsh's plot. I'd smoothed it out that afternoon. The grass was as level, undisturbed. I waited. Midnight came and went. 1 a.m. I was starting to feel ridiculous, sitting in a cemetery in the middle of the night, watching dirt. I was about to pack it in when I heard it. A soft sound, like sand sliding through fingers. I clicked off my flashlight and watched. The dirt on Eleanor's grave was moving. Not being moved, moving, rising up in a slow mound, as if something underneath was pushing it aside. I couldn't see anyone near the grave. No footprints in the grass, no shadows, just the earth rearranging itself. I stood up, my legs shaking. The sound continued, that soft, persistent shifting. I should have left. Every instinct told me to get back in my truck and go home. Instead, I grabbed my shovel from the truck bed and walked toward the grave. The mound was about 2 feet high now, fresh and dark. I stuck the shovel in, started moving dirt aside. I don't know what I expected to find. Maybe a groundhog tunnel, some kind of natural explanation. But 3 feet down, the blade hit something solid. Wood. I cleared more dirt away, working faster now, my breath coming hard. It was a coffin lid, plain pine, old but intact. Except it wasn't where it was supposed to be. Eleanor Marsh was buried 6 feet down, according to the records. This was barely 3 feet. I brushed dirt off the wood, looking for any kind of marking, any explanation. That's when I saw the scratches. Deep gouges in the wood, running lengthwise, 4 parallel lines like fingers. They were on the inside of the lid. I could tell by the way the splinters pointed. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out with shaking hands. Text from my supervisor. Everything okay down there? I looked back at the hole I'd dug. The scratches seemed deeper in the flashlight beam, more deliberate. I could smell the earth, dark and old, and underneath it, something else, something sweet and wrong. I took a photo of the coffin lid, filled in the hole, and left. The next morning, I showed my supervisor the photo. He stared at it for a long time, then pulled up the cemetery records on his computer. Eleanor Marsh died June 4th, 1923. Cause of death, cataloged as respiratory failure. Buried June 7th, same year. He scrolled down to the notes section, something I'd never thought to check. There was an addendum, added 6 months after the burial. A single line, family requested reinterment after concerns raised. Request denied by cemetery board. What kind of concerns? I asked. He didn't answer. He just closed the file and told me to stay away from row 9C unless absolutely necessary. I follow that advice now, but every Monday morning I still see it from a distance. Fresh dirt, piled neat and careful on Eleanor Marsh's grave. I don't smooth it out anymore. I don't go near it. Because here's what I can't stop thinking about. Those scratches were fresh, not century-old marks worn smooth by time and decay. Fresh, deep, desperate. And every Monday, there's more dirt. Something down there is still digging its way up, 3 feet at a time. And I think, eventually, 3 feet is going to be close enough. Some things you can't unsee, even when you're trying. I'm Carla, and I've been a funeral director at Riverside Memorial Home for 7 years. People think this job is morbid, but it's really about service, helping families navigate the worst days of their lives, creating space for grief, making sure their loved ones are treated with dignity. I take pride in that. I'm good at staying calm, at reading a room, at knowing when to speak and when to just be present. We had a service scheduled for a woman named Diane Peterson, 72 years old, retired school teacher, died peacefully in her sleep. Her family wanted a traditional viewing before the funeral. 2 daughters, a son, grandchildren. They seemed like a normal family, sad but coping. We prepared Mrs. Peterson in her favorite blue dress, did her makeup the way her daughters requested, positioned her hands. Everything by the book. The viewing was scheduled for 6 p.m. on a Thursday. Families arrived in waves, Teachers she'd worked with, neighbors, former students. Everything went smoothly. People paid their respects, shared stories, cried quietly. By 8:30, everyone had left except her immediate family. I gave them privacy, stepping into my office down the hall to finish some paperwork. The older daughter, Karen, knocked on my door around 9. She looked pale, uncomfortable. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said, "but something's wrong with my mother." I followed her back to the viewing room. The other family members were standing near the casket, not speaking. I approached slowly, professional smile and pipes, expecting maybe a flower arrangement had fallen or some makeup had smudged. "Her mouth," Karen said quietly. "It looks different." I looked at Mrs. Peterson. Her expression was exactly as I'd left it, peaceful, neutral, mouth gently closed. "I'm not seeing any changes," I said carefully. "The smile," Karen insisted. "It's wider." I looked again. Nothing seemed off to me, but the family was clearly distressed, so I assured them I'd make any adjustments needed. I asked them to wait in the lobby while I worked. Once they were gone, I examined Mrs. Peterson more closely. Her makeup was perfect. Her features were positioned exactly as I'd set them hours before. I took photos on my phone, standard practice when families raise concerns, and rejoined them in the lobby. I showed them the photos, explaining that sometimes lighting can create illusions, that grief can make us see things that aren't there. They weren't entirely convinced, but they thanked me and left around 9:30. The next morning, I arrived early to prepare for the funeral service. I checked on Mrs. Peterson first, as always. Everything looked fine, but I couldn't shake what Karen had said, so I pulled up the photos from the night before on my phone. Then I pulled up the photos from when we'd first prepared her 2 days earlier. I set them side by side, zooming in on her face. The smile was different. Not hugely, not like a grin or anything dramatic, but her mouth was slightly wider in the second photo, just a few millimeters, but definitely wider. I felt cold. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that I'd probably adjusted something and forgotten, that grief was contagious, and now I was seeing things too. But I couldn't let it go. We have security cameras throughout the building, standard for funeral homes, to protect against theft and liability issues. I went to my office and pulled up the footage from the viewing room. I started at 6 p.m. when the viewing began and watched at double speed. People coming and going, respectful and quiet. At 8:30, the room emptied except for the family. I slowed it to normal speed. 8:35. The family is standing around the casket. Normal. 8:40. Karen leaves to get me. The others stay. 8:42. The son and younger daughter step back from the casket, talking to each other. 8:45. The room is empty for 90 seconds while I'm talking to Karen. I rewound and watched that 90 seconds again. Just an empty room, flowers, the casket. Mrs. Peterson lying peaceful and still. Except, I watched it a third time, frame by frame. Between frame 14,890 and frame 14,891, there's a change. It's so subtle I almost missed it. The corner of her mouth shifts, just slightly, maybe a millimeter. I kept watching every time the room emptied, even for 30 seconds when people stepped into the hall. It happened again. A tiny shift, her mouth getting incrementally wider. I watched 4 hours of footage, every single time. The room was empty. Her expression changed, never when anyone was looking, only when she was alone. By the end of the viewing, her mouth was nearly a full centimeter wider than when we'd started. I sat in my office, staring at the frozen frame on my monitor, Mrs. Peterson's face captured mid-shift. I checked the camera. No technical glitches, no pixelation. I checked our prep room footage. She'd been perfectly still during preparation for hours. This only started during the viewing. The funeral was in 3 hours. I went to the viewing room and checked her one more time. She looked exactly as she had the night before, that slightly too wide mouth, like she was on the verge of smiling about something. I couldn't stop the funeral. I couldn't tell the family what I'd seen. What would I even say? I performed the service. The family didn't mention the smile again. We closed the casket, transported her to the cemetery, lowered her into the ground, professional and smooth, like always. That night, I went through the footage one more time. I had to be sure I wasn't losing my mind. I watched from the beginning, tracking every change. The shifts were consistent, methodical, always when no one was present. Then I noticed something else. At 8:57 p.m., during one of the empty moments, there's a reflection in the polished wood of the casket. Just a smear of light from the chandelier above. But when I zoomed in and adjusted the contrast, I could see something in that reflection. Not clear, but definite. Mrs. Peterson's eyes were open. I deleted the footage. I know that sounds bad, destroying evidence, avoiding the truth, but I couldn't keep it, couldn't risk someone else seeing it, couldn't risk letting it become real. I still work at Riverside Memorial. I still conduct viewings, still help families grieve, but I don't review security footage anymore. And during viewings, I make sure someone is always in the room. Always. Because if you're never alone, maybe you'll stay still. Maybe you'll keep whatever you're trying to say locked behind your teeth. Maybe that smile will never finish forming into whatever comes next. Every job has rules you don't question. My name's Dennis, and I've worked cemetery maintenance for Walker Hills Memorial Gardens for 3 years. It's straightforward work, mowing, edging, keeping the grounds presentable. I work the day shift, usually alone except for weekends when we get extra crew. The pay's okay, the hours are predictable, and mostly it's quiet. I like quiet. There are 60 acres of cemetery here, divided into sections by decade. The older sections are up the hill near the original chapel, graves from the late 1800s, early 1900s. The newer sections spread out toward the road. My job is to keep everything maintained, which means mowing in concentric patterns, trimming around headstones, raking leaves in fall. On my second day, my supervisor, guy named Rick, been there 20 years, walked me through the grounds, pointing out the sections, showing me the maintenance shed, explaining the mowing patterns. We were heading through Section D, one of the older areas, when he stopped next to an empty patch of grass. No headstone, no marker, just grass, slightly overgrown. This is plot 447, he said. Don't mow it. I looked at him, waiting for more. Just don't, he repeated. Mow around it, edge around it, but don't run the mower over it. Is there a reason? I asked. He was quiet for a moment. It's been policy since before I started. Just leave it alone. That should have been enough. Should have been a clear instruction. Stay away. But I'm not good with rules I don't understand. They itch at me. For 2.5 weeks, I followed instructions. I mowed around plot 447, leaving a ragged rectangle of tall grass in the middle of an otherwise perfect section. It looked terrible, unprofessional. Every time I passed it, I felt that itch. On my third week, Rick called in sick. I was alone on the grounds. It was a Wednesday, mid-morning, sunny and clear. Perfect mowing weather. I worked through sections A, B, and C, then moved to D. When I got to plot 447, I stopped. The grass was nearly 6 inches tall now, dandelions pushing up through it. It looked like neglect. It looked like failure. I fired up the mower and cut it. Took maybe 2 minutes. The grass cut clean and easy. Same as everywhere else. Nothing dramatic happened. No thunder, no sudden cold. Just grass falling in neat rows behind the mower blade. When I was done, Section D looked perfect, uniform and professional. I finished the rest of my shift, locked up the shed, went home. That night, around 11:30, my phone rang, number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Static at first, then a voice, woman's voice, thin and distant. Why did you wake me? I pulled the phone away, looked at the number again. Who is this? Why did you wake me? Slower this time, each word deliberate. I think you have the wrong number, I said, and hung up. 5 minutes later, it rang again. Same number, I sent it to voicemail. At midnight, I checked my voicemail. 7 messages, all from the same number. I played the first one. Why did you wake me? Same voice, same question. I deleted it and played the second. Why did you wake me? Identical, word for word, same inflection, same static underneath. All 7 messages were the same. I blocked the number and tried to sleep. Couldn't. Around 2 a.m., my phone rang again. Different number this time. I didn't answer. It went to voicemail. At 2:15, another call, another number. 2:30, another. Each time I let it go to voicemail. By morning, I had 23 voicemails. I played one at random. Why did you wake me? Same voice, same question. I called Rick, told him I wasn't feeling well, took a sick day. I sat in my apartment and watched my phone ring every 15 minutes, each call from a different number. I stopped checking the voicemails. On Thursday, I went back to work. Rick was there, looking at me strangely. You okay? He asked. Yeah, stomach thing. He nodded slowly. You mow plot 447? My throat went dry. How did you know? Because it's been cut, he said quietly, and because you look like you haven't slept. I told him about the calls, about the voicemails. He listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he walked to his truck and pulled out a file folder, old, yellowed at the edges. He handed it to me. Plot 447 was registered in 1952, he said. Woman named Catherine Price, age 37, buried without a headstone at family request. Why no marker? Because technically she wasn't dead. He looked at the empty plot. She was in a coma. Family had her declared legally dead, buried her in an unmarked grave. Back then, you could do things like that if you had money and the right connections. She was still breathing when they put her in the ground. I felt sick. How long? I asked. Does it matter? He took the folder back. 3 days, 3 hours, 3 minutes. Take your pick. Long enough that she knew what was happening. Long enough that she tried to get out. Did she? No, he said. They found her when they were expanding the cemetery in 1971. Had to relocate some of the older plots. They opened the casket to transfer the remains. He paused. The inside of the lid was scratched to pieces. Her fingernails were gone. She'd suffocated, screaming into wood and dirt. I didn't go home that night. I stayed at a motel. The calls continued, my phone lighting up every 15 minutes, voicemails piling up faster than I could delete them. I stopped listening to them after the first 50. They were all the same anyway. On Friday, I went back to work and told Rick I was quitting. He didn't try to change my mind. He just handed me my final check and walked me to my car. For what it's worth, he said, I'm sorry. Why didn't you just tell me? I asked. Why the rule without explanation? Would you have believed me? He was right. I wouldn't have. I drove away from Walker Hills Memorial Gardens that afternoon and haven't been back. That was 8 months ago. The calls finally stopped after 6 weeks. Just went silent one day, like a switch flipped, but I still keep my phone on vibrate because sometimes, not often, but sometimes, late at night, I feel it buzz in my pocket, and when I check, there's no missed call, no notification, nothing. Just the phantom feeling of someone trying to reach me from somewhere dark and patient. Someone who's been waiting underground for 70 years finally heard when the mower blade cut through the grass above her bones and just wants to know, why did I wake her? Some details matter more than you'd think. I'm Jude, and I've been an embalmer for 15 years. I work at Crestview Funeral Home, a mid-sized operation that handles maybe 200 cases a year. It's technical work, preserving the deceased, preparing them for viewing, making sure families can say goodbye to someone who looks peaceful and cared for. I take pride in the details, the positioning, the expression, the hands. Especially the hands. Hands tell a story. You can see a life in someone's hands. Calluses from work, rings from marriage, veins that speak of age. When I position them, I'm mindful of that story. Most families request the traditional pose, hands folded over the abdomen, fingers interlaced, peaceful and prayerful. It's what people expect. It's what brings comfort. We received a case on a Tuesday morning. Woman named Patricia Haynes, 64 years old, died of cardiac arrest in her home. Her daughter made the arrangements, requested a simple viewing, cremation to follow, standard procedure. I brought Mrs. Haynes into the prep room around 10 a.m. and began the process. She'd been a small woman, thin hands, no jewelry except a wedding band. I embalmed her, set her features, dressed her in the navy dress her daughter had provided. Then I positioned her hands, right over left, fingers interlaced, resting gently just below her sternum. Perfect. I'd done this thousands of times. It was second nature. I left her in the prep room to finish setting. We keep them on the table for a few hours before moving them to the viewing room, just to make sure everything stays in place. I went to my office to handle paperwork, returned around 2 p.m. to check on her. Her hands had separated. Not dramatically. They were still resting on her abdomen, but they weren't interlaced anymore. They were lying flat, palms down, fingers slightly spread, like she was bracing herself against the table. I stared at them for a long moment. This happens sometimes. Body settles, gravity shifts things, rigor mortis releases. It's not common with hands, especially not after I've positioned them carefully, but it's not impossible. I repositioned them, right over left, fingers interlaced, made sure they were secure this time, tucked them slightly tighter. I checked on her at 4 p.m. before I left for the day. The hands had separated again. Same position, flat, palms down, fingers spread. I called my supervisor, a woman named Linda, who'd been in the business for 30 years. She came down to the prep room, looked at Mrs. Haynes, looked at me. "You sure you're interlacing them properly?" she asked. Positive. She watched me reposition the hands. I was meticulous about it, wove the fingers together, positioned the thumbs, made sure everything was natural and secure. Linda nodded, satisfied. "Probably just settling," she said, "but keep an eye on it. If it happens again, we might need to use wire." Wire is a last resort, literally wiring the hands together internally. We avoid it when possible because it feels disrespectful, invasive, but sometimes it's necessary. Linda left. I stayed an extra hour, watching Mrs. Haynes. The hands didn't move. At 6 p.m., I went home. The next morning, I arrived at 7:30. Mrs. Haynes was being moved to the viewing room at 9 for a 10 a.m. viewing. I went to the prep room to do a final check. Her hands were separated, flat, palms down, fingers spread. This time, I noticed something else. The fingers on her right hand were pressed harder against the table than the left, like she was pushing, like she was trying to leverage herself up. I felt cold. This wasn't settling. This was something else. I repositioned the hands again, more carefully than I ever had. I interlaced the fingers, positioned them exactly right, then wrapped a thin cloth around them, not visible, but enough to keep them together. It's something we do sometimes with difficult cases. At 8:30, I checked again. The cloth had loosened. The hands were separated, flat, palms down, fingers spread wider this time. I removed the cloth and stared at her hands. In 15 years, I'd never seen anything like this. Bodies don't move on their own. Not like this, not repeatedly, not with purpose. I went to my office and pulled up her file. Patricia Haynes, 64, cardiac arrest, no autopsy required. She'd been under hospice care, had a documented heart condition. The daughter's contact information, the service arrangements, cremation authorization, everything standard. Then I saw the notes section. A single line added by the intake coordinator. Daughter mentioned mothers had expressed fear of being buried, preferred cremation for peace of mind. Fear of being buried. I went back to the prep room. Mrs. Haynes was lying exactly as I'd left her. Serene expression, hands separated, palms flat. I did something I'd never done before. I spoke to her. Mrs. Haynes, I said quietly, you're not being buried. You're being cremated. Your daughter made sure of that. You don't need to worry. I felt ridiculous, talking to the dead like they could hear me, like they could understand, but I repositioned her hands one more time, right over left, fingers interlaced, and I left them. I went to get coffee. When I came back 15 minutes later, her hands were still interlaced. I moved her to the viewing room at 9 a.m. The service went perfectly. The daughter thanked me for making her mother look peaceful. I kept checking throughout the viewing. The hands stayed interlaced the entire time. After the service, we transported Mrs. Haynes to the crematory. I went with her. I don't usually, but I needed to see it through. I needed to know she was actually cremated, that she wouldn't be buried, that her fear wouldn't follow her. They loaded her into the retort at 2 p.m. I watched through the viewing window as the flames started. And I swear, I know how this sounds. I know what people will think. But I swear, I saw her hands move one last time. They didn't separate. They didn't flatten. They just relaxed. The fingers loosened. The tension released, like she'd been holding on to something and finally let go. The cremation took 2 hours. I stayed the entire time. When it was done, I collected her ashes, placed them in the urn her daughter had selected, and delivered them personally. I didn't tell anyone what I'd seen, what I thought I'd seen. There's no point. In this business, you learn to keep certain things to yourself. But I think about Mrs. Haynes sometimes, about how she spent her whole life afraid of being trapped underground, of being buried alive, of waking up in the dark, about how that fear followed her even after death, manifested in those desperate hands, pushing and bracing and trying to escape something that hadn't even happened yet. I'm more careful now with how I position hands. I pay attention to the details in the files, the fears, the requests, the things that mattered to people when they were alive. Because sometimes those things still matter after, and sometimes the dead will do whatever they can to make sure you understand, even if it's just moving their hands over and over until someone finally listens. The night shift has a different rhythm. I'm Ming, and I've been a transport driver for Lakeshore Mortuary Services for 4 years. We're a contracted service. We pick up deceased individuals from hospitals, nursing homes, private residences, sometimes the medical examiner's office, and transport them to funeral homes. It's unglamorous work, often at odd hours, but it pays well and I don't mind the solitude. I drive alone, usually. The deceased don't make conversation. The job is simple. Get the call, drive to the location, coordinate with staff, secure the body in a transport bag, load it into the van, drive to the funeral home, unload, be respectful, be efficient, be professional. I've done this hundreds of times. It's routine. I got a call at 1:45 a.m. on a Saturday in October. Pickup from County Morgue, delivery to Riverside Memorial Home. The county morgue is about 40 minutes outside the city, a low, concrete building next to the county hospital, accessible only by a winding 2-lane road through farmland. I've picked up from there maybe a dozen times. It's always quiet, always efficient. I arrived at 2:30 a.m. The night attendant, guy named Carl, been there forever, met me at the loading bay. He had the paperwork ready, body already prepped in a transport bag on a gurry. Quiet night? I asked, signing the transfer forms. Dead quiet, he said, then smiled at his own joke. He'd probably used it 1,000 times. We loaded the gurry into my van. Standard black transport bag, zipped and sealed, tag on the outside, male, 73 years old, natural causes, nothing unusual. Carl helped me secure the gurry, and I was back on the road by 2:45 a.m. The route back to the city is straightforward. County Road 12 for about 30 minutes, then merge onto Highway 50 for the last 10 minutes. There's nothing out there at night. No gas stations, no houses, just fields and darkness. I had the radio on low, classic rock station, windows cracked to stay alert. I was about 20 minutes into the drive when I heard it. Fabric rustling, soft, deliberate, coming from the back of the van. I turned down the radio and listened. Nothing. Just road noise and wind. I convinced myself I'd imagined it. Maybe the gurry had shifted slightly. Maybe the bag had settled. It happens. 2 minutes later, I heard it again. Rustling, like someone moving inside a sleeping bag. Distinct and unmistakable. I pulled over onto the shoulder, put the van in park, and sat there with my hands on the steering wheel. My heart was pounding. I told myself to be rational. Bodies make noises sometimes. Gases release, joints settle. It's normal decomposition. But this hadn't sounded like gas. It had sounded like movement. I got out and opened the back doors of the van. The interior light came on, illuminating the gurry. The transport bag was exactly as I'd loaded it, sealed, secured with straps. I stood there for a moment, listening, nothing, just the sound of my own breathing and a dog barking somewhere far off in the darkness. I closed the doors, got back in the driver's seat, and continued driving. I turned the radio up a little louder. 5 minutes later, the rustling came back, louder this time, more insistent. I could hear the fabric of the bag moving, like someone was shifting position, like someone was trying to sit up. Stop it, I said out loud. I don't know why I said it. I don't know who I was talking to. The rustling stopped. I drove faster. County Road 12 is empty at 3 a.m. No other cars, no cops. I pushed the van to 70, then 75. The turnoff to Highway 50 was coming up. Once I hit the highway, I'd be back in civilization, back where there were lights and other people and things that made sense. That's when I saw it in the rearview mirror. The transport bag was sitting upright, not the body inside it. The bag itself, zipped and sealed, sitting vertical on the gurry, like someone had propped it up. The shape inside was unmistakable. Head, shoulders, torso, sitting. I slammed on the brakes. The van skidded to a stop in the middle of the road. I sat there, staring into the rearview mirror, my hands shaking so hard I could barely grip the wheel. The bag was still upright, still, silent, waiting. I grabbed my phone and called Carl at the morgue. It rang 6 times before he answered, groggy and confused. Carl, it's Ming. The body you gave me. Was there anything unusual about it? What? No. Why? Are you sure? No signs of, I don't know, anything weird? Ming, it's 3 in the morning. What's going on? I didn't know how to explain. The body's moving. Silence on the other end. Then, bodies don't move. I know that, Carl, but this one is. More silence. Where are you? County Road 12, about 5 minutes from the highway. Drive to Riverside, he said. Unload it. Call me when you're done. If there's a problem, we'll file an incident report in the morning. He hung up. I looked in the rearview mirror again. The bag was still upright. I could see the outline of the head, the shoulders, the way the fabric stretched over where a face would be. I put the van in drive and continued toward Riverside Memorial. I didn't look in the mirror again. I kept my eyes on the road, my hands on the wheel, and drove. The rustling continued behind me, not constant, but periodic. Every few minutes, a soft movement, a shifting of weight. I turned the radio up until it was almost painful, drowning out the sound. I reached Riverside Memorial at 3:35 a.m. The night attendant, a woman named Joyce, met me at the delivery entrance. She helped me unload the gurry, and the moment it was out of my van, I felt the tension release. You okay? Joyce asked. You look pale. Long night, I said. She wheeled the gurry inside. I watched it disappear down the corridor, the transport bag now lying flat and still, like it had been the entire time, like nothing had happened. I drove back to the mortuary service garage, parked the van, and sat in my car for 20 minutes before I could bring myself to go home. The next morning, I called Carl. He checked the records. The body I'd transported, 73-year-old male, natural causes, had been autopsied the day before. Cause of death was definitive, heart failure. He'd been dead for 18 hours before I picked him up. No possibility of misdiagnosis, no chance he was still alive. So, what do you think happened? I asked. Carl was quiet for a long time. I think you drove alone on a dark road at 3 in the morning, and your mind played tricks. Yeah, I said, probably. But I know what I saw in that rearview mirror. I know what I heard. And I know that when I opened the back doors at Riverside, there were condensation marks on the inside of the plastic bag, right where someone's breath would fog up the material if they were breathing. I still work for Lakeshore Mortuary Services. I still do night pickups. But I don't take calls from County Morgue anymore. I told my supervisor I'm not available for that route. She didn't ask why. And I never, ever look in the rearview mirror during transport, because some things aren't meant to be seen sitting up. Recognition comes slowly sometimes. I'm Ortega, Director Ortega, technically, though most people just call me by my last name. I've been running memorial services at Glenwood Funeral Home for 12 years. It's a family business, third generation, and I take that legacy seriously. We handle everything: viewings, funerals, burials, Cremations. We're a full service home, and we pride ourselves on attention to detail and respect for every family that walks through our doors. Our chapel can hold about 80 people comfortably. It's a beautiful space: oak pews, stained glass windows, soft lighting. We conduct 3 to 4 services a week on average. I personally oversee every one. It's my job to make sure that everything runs smoothly, that families feel supported, that their loved ones are honored properly. I started noticing him in early March. An elderly man, maybe mid 70s, dressed in a gray suit that looked expensive but outdated, not vintage, just old. The kind of suit someone might have bought in the 1980s and kept in good condition. He sat in the back row during a service for a woman named Helen Kowalski. I didn't think much of it. Services are open to the community, and sometimes people attend who aren't immediate family, former neighbors, old friends, colleagues from decades past. The next week, we had a service for a middle-aged man who died in a car accident. The elderly man in the gray suit was there again. Same seat, back row, left side. He sat quietly through the entire service, didn't speak to anyone, didn't sign the guest book. When the service ended, he was gone before I could greet him. Third week, same thing, service for a young woman, overdose. The man in the gray suit, back row, silent. Fourth week, different deceased, same man. By the fifth week, I was paying attention. We had a service for a teenage boy, and sure enough, there he was. Gray suit, back row. This time, I made a point of approaching him after the service. "Excuse me," I said, offering my hand. "I'm Director Ortega. I've noticed you've been attending our services. Were you acquainted with the families?" He looked at me with pale blue eyes, watery and distant. He didn't take my hand. "I'm just paying respects," he said quietly. "That's very kind. Would you like to sign our guest book? The families appreciate knowing who attended." "No, thank you." He stood and walked past me, out the chapel doors, into the parking lot. I watched him go. He didn't get into a car. He just walked down the sidewalk and disappeared around the corner. I checked the guest books from the previous services. No signature that could have been his. I asked our receptionist if she'd seen him sign in. She hadn't noticed him at all. The pattern continued. Every single service we held, regardless of who the deceased was, the man in the gray suit appeared. Always in the back row, always alone, always silent. He never spoke to families, never offered condolences, never participated in the reception afterward. He just sat, watched, and left. After 6 weeks, I started to feel uneasy. It wasn't that he was doing anything wrong. He was perfectly respectful, perfectly quiet. But there was something off about his consistency, his silence, the way he seemed to exist at the edge of everything without ever engaging. I decided to check the security footage. We have cameras throughout the building, standard precaution. I pulled up footage from the most recent service, a funeral for a man named Robert Chen. I watched the elderly man enter the chapel at 9:55 a.m., 5 minutes before the service started. He walked directly to the back row, sat down, and remained motionless for the next hour. When the service ended, He stood, walked out, and exited through the front doors. I rewound to the beginning of the day, watching for when he arrived. The footage showed him walking up the front steps at 9:50 a.m. But here's what bothered me. I couldn't see where he came from. He just appeared at the bottom of the steps and walked up. No car in the parking lot, no approach from the sidewalk. One frame he wasn't there, the next frame he was. I checked footage from the other services. Same thing every time. He appeared, attended, disappeared. I pulled the guest book from a service we'd held 8 weeks prior and flipped through the signatures. Most were legible, some weren't. But there was one signature near the back that caught my eye. The handwriting was shaky, old-fashioned. Graham Price. I checked the other guest books. The signature appeared in 4 of them, always the same handwriting, always at the end. I went to my office and searched our records for Graham Price. We have decades of files, every service we've ever conducted, every burial we've overseen. It took me 20 minutes, but I found it. Graham Price, funeral service held on January 14th, 8 weeks ago. Died at 76, no surviving family, burial at Oakwood Cemetery. I sat at my desk, staring at the file. The service date lined up. The first time I'd noticed the man in the gray suit was the week after Graham Price's funeral. I opened the file further. There was a photo attached, standard practice when we handle services. We take a photo of the deceased for our records, just in case there are questions later about identification or preparation. The photo showed an elderly man with pale blue eyes, thin gray hair, dressed in a gray suit. The same man who'd been attending our services for the past 8 weeks. I closed the file and sat very still. There had to be an explanation, a relative with a similar appearance, someone who'd been affected by Graham's death and was grieving in an unusual way. People process death differently. Maybe attending services helped him cope. But the signature, the same signature, in the same handwriting, in 4 different guest books, and the security footage appearing from nowhere, disappearing to nowhere. Wanted to tell someone, my assistant, my business partner, anyone, but what would I say? That a dead man was attending funerals, that I'd been greeting a ghost for 2 months? The next week, we had a service scheduled for a woman named Dorothy Park. I arrived early, positioned myself near the chapel entrance, and watched. At 9:55 a.m., the man in the gray suit walked through the doors. He didn't look at me, didn't acknowledge my presence. He walked directly to the back row and sat down. I approached him before the service started. "Mr. Price," I said quietly. He looked up at me, those pale blue eyes, watery and distant. "I know who you are," I continued. "I saw your file. Your service was 8 weeks ago." He didn't react, didn't seem surprised or frightened or defensive. He just looked at me. "Why are you here?" I asked. He was silent for a long moment. Then, "I'm waiting." "For what?" "To see who comes." "Who comes to what?" "To mine." The service was starting. People were filing in, taking their seats. I stepped back, let him sit there, and conducted the funeral as I always did. Professional, respectful, present. After the service, I checked the back row. He was gone. I checked the guest book. His signature was there, shaky and old-fashioned. Graham Price. I went to my office and pulled his file again. I read through everything: his obituary, his burial information, the attendance log from his service. 4 people had attended Graham Price's funeral. 4. A social worker from the nursing home where he'd died, a chaplain, a representative from the Veterans Affairs Office, and me. No family, no friends, no one who'd known him personally. I thought about what he'd said. I'm waiting to see who comes. He'd spent 8 weeks attending our services, watching families gather, watching people mourn, watching communities come together to honor their dead. And he was waiting to see if anyone would come for him, waiting to see if he mattered to anyone. But no one had, and no one ever would. I see him still, every service. Gray suit, back row, silent and watching. I don't approach him anymore. I just let him sit there, bearing witness to the love other people receive, to the ceremonies he never had. And I think someday, when enough time has passed and he's seen enough proof that he's been forgotten, he'll stop coming. But I don't know if that will be a relief or a tragedy, because at least now someone knows he's there. At least now someone sees Graham Price. Gifts from the dead have weight. I'm Tess, and I've been a groundskeeper at Willowbrook Cemetery for 6 years. It's honest work, maintaining the grounds, keeping the pathways clear, making sure the place feels peaceful for visitors. I work mostly alone, early mornings when the dew is still heavy on the grass and the sun is just coming up. It's quiet then, just me, the birds, and 100 years of people resting under the earth. Willowbrook has about 800 plots, organized in a grid system. Each grave has a number, easier for record keeping than trying to remember names. I know most of them by heart now. I know which graves get regular visitors, which ones are decorated for holidays, which ones have been forgotten. It becomes familiar after a while, like knowing the faces of neighbors you never speak to. Grave 112 is in the eastern section, under a large maple tree. The marker is simple, just a name and dates. Thomas Brennan, 1937 to 2004. No epitaph, no decoration. According to our records, he had no surviving family. The plot was purchased by a church charity that handles burials for people who die alone. I first noticed the roses on a Monday morning in late April. 3 white roses laid across the base of the headstone. Fresh, still dewy, stems cut clean. I assumed someone had placed them there over the weekend. Maybe a distant relative. Maybe someone who knew him from church. It happens sometimes. Tuesday morning, 3 more white roses. Same placement, same freshness. Wednesday, the same. By Thursday, I was curious. I checked the visitor log at the cemetery office. We ask people to sign in, though not everyone does. No one had signed in for plot 112. I asked the other groundskeepers if they'd seen anyone visiting that section. No one had. Friday morning, 3 more roses. I decided to take them home. Not to be disrespectful, I just wanted to see if the pattern would break. If someone was leaving them, they'd notice they were missing and maybe adjust their routine. Maybe I'd catch a glimpse of who was doing it. I placed the roses in a vase on my nightstand. They were beautiful, perfect white petals, no browning at the edges, no wilting. They smelled faintly sweet. That night, I went to bed around 11. I live alone in a small house about 3 miles from the cemetery. Quiet neighborhood, hardly any traffic. I'm used to silence. I woke up at 2:15 a.m. to the sound of someone sobbing. It was coming from outside my bedroom window. A woman's voice, deep and broken, the kind of crying that sounds like physical pain. I lay in bed, frozen, listening. The sobbing continued, raw, desperate, endless. I got up, looked out the window. My bedroom faces the backyard, just grass and a fence, a small shed in the corner. No one was there. The yard was empty, illuminated by the motion sensor light I'd installed last year. But the sobbing continued, clear and close, like someone was standing right beneath the window. I grabbed my phone, ready to call 911. The sobbing stopped. I waited, listening to my own heartbeat. Nothing. Just silence and the hum of the refrigerator downstairs. I looked at the roses on my nightstand. They'd turned black. Not wilted, not dried, black. The petals were still perfect in shape, still fresh looking, but completely black like they'd been dipped in ink. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I sat in my living room with all the lights on, the black roses still upstairs, and waited for morning. At dawn, I drove to the cemetery. I took the roses with me. I didn't want them in my house anymore. I walked to grave 112 and placed them back at the base of the headstone. The moment I set them down, they turned white again. The black faded like it had never been there, and the roses looked exactly as they had when I'd first picked them up. I stepped back, staring at the grave. Thomas Brennan, dead for 21 years, no surviving family. But someone was leaving roses, and that someone did not want them moved. Monday morning, 3 fresh white roses. I left them there. Tuesday, 3 more. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Every single morning, 3 white roses laid carefully across the base of the headstone. I stopped questioning it. I stopped trying to figure out who was leaving them. I just accepted it as part of the cemetery, like the maple tree or the dew on the grass. But I couldn't stop thinking about the sobbing, about the black roses, about the weight of those 3 perfect stems in my hands and the way they'd changed the moment they left the cemetery. 2 weeks later, I was doing my rounds in the eastern section when I saw her. An older woman, maybe 70, dressed in a long coat despite the warm weather. She was standing at grave 112, her back to me. I watched her from a distance, waiting to see if she'd leave the roses. She didn't move, just stood there, perfectly still, looking down at the headstone. I approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. "Good morning," I said gently. She didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge me at all. "Are you visiting someone?" I asked. She still didn't respond. I stepped closer, close enough to see her profile. Her face was blank, expressionless, eyes fixed on the grave. She was wearing a wedding ring, old gold, tarnished. Ma'am, are you all right? She turned to look at me then. Her eyes were wet, rimmed red, like she'd been crying for hours. But her face showed no emotion, just those eyes, raw and broken, staring at me. He waited, she said. Her voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. I made him wait. Wait for what? She looked back at the grave. I promised I'd come. 50 years, I promised. But I was afraid. I was married to someone else, had a life, had children. I couldn't. She stopped, her breath catching. He waited anyway. Every day. He never married. He never moved on. He just waited. I didn't know what to say. Stood there, watching her shoulders shake with silent sobs. When did he die? I asked quietly. 2004, she said. 21 years ago. I didn't find out until last month. I saw his obituary in an old newspaper archive. No service, no visitors, nothing. He died alone. I'm sorry, I said. She wiped her eyes. I bring him roses now, 3 every day, 1 for every decade I made him wait. She turned and walked away, down the path toward the cemetery gates. I watched her go, watched her disappear around the bend. I looked down at grave 112, 3 white roses laid carefully at the base of the headstone. I never saw the woman again, but every morning, without fail, 3 white roses appeared. I stopped wondering how. I stopped trying to understand. Some things don't need understanding. Some things just are. Except one morning in July, I arrived to find something different. The roses were still there, 3 white stems, perfect and fresh. But next to them, laid carefully on the grass, was a single black rose. I knelt down, looked at it closely. It was real, not artificial. A genuine rose, black as ink, perfect in shape. I didn't touch it. I just looked, and I realized she was dead. The woman who'd been leaving the roses, who'd been mourning for 21 years of guilt and grief, she was gone. And now someone else was leaving flowers for her. Thomas Brennan, maybe. Finally able to reciprocate after 2 decades of white roses and whispered apologies. Or maybe something else, something patient and eternal and too vast for me to understand. I still work at Willowbrook Cemetery. I still do my morning rounds, and every day at grave 112, I find 3 white roses and 1 black rose. I never touch them. I never take them home. I just let them be. Gifts from the dead to the dead, tokens of love that transcended time and fear and failure. And sometimes, on quiet mornings when the dew is heavy and the sun is just rising, I think I hear sobbing near grave 112. Not desperate anymore, not broken, just soft, just sad. Just 2 people finally together, mourning all the years they lost. Sometimes goodbye doesn't end when you think it does. I'm Ben, and I've been a funeral director at Cornerstone Memorial Home for 9 years. It's demanding work, long hours, emotional intensity, constant attention to detail, but it's also meaningful. I help people navigate the worst days of their lives, and I take that responsibility seriously. Every service I conduct is personal. Every family I work with matters. We had a standard service scheduled for a man named Robert Hendricks, 79 years old, retired machinist, died peacefully at home with hospice care. His wife, Ellen, made all the arrangements herself. She was composed, practical, clear about what she wanted. A simple viewing, graveside service, burial at Oakmont Cemetery. She'd been married to Robert for 56 years. The viewing was scheduled for Thursday evening, 6 to 9 p.m. We prepared Robert in his favorite suit, navy blue, slightly worn at the elbows, and positioned him in the casket Ellen had selected. Basic, dignified, affordable. She'd said she didn't need anything fancy. Robert wouldn't have wanted that. The viewing went smoothly. Family and friends arrived in waves, paid their respects, shared stories. Ellen stood near the casket for most of the evening, greeting people, thanking them for coming. She didn't cry. She just stood there, steady and present, like she was hosting a dinner party instead of her husband's funeral. By 8:45, most people had left. Just a few stragglers remained, distant cousins, old neighbors saying their final goodbyes. I approached Ellen gently. "We'll be closing in about 15 minutes," I said, "but take whatever time you need." She nodded. "Could I have a few minutes alone with him? Just me?" "Of course. Take as long as you need." I ushered the remaining visitors toward the lobby, gave them brochures about the graveside service scheduled for the next morning, and left Ellen alone in the viewing room. I went to my office down the hall to finalize some paperwork. 20 minutes later, I returned to check on her. The viewing room was empty. Ellen was gone. The casket was still open, Robert positioned exactly as he had been all evening. I assumed she'd let herself out. Sometimes families need to leave quickly, can't handle prolonged goodbyes. I closed the casket, locked the viewing room, and went home. The next morning, I arrived at 8 a.m. to prepare for the transport to the cemetery. The graveside service was scheduled for 10. I did a final check of the viewing room, made sure everything was ready. That's when I noticed it. Robert's wedding ring was gone. I checked his hand carefully. The indentation was still there, the pale band of skin where the ring had been for 56 years. But the ring itself was missing. I checked the casket lining, thinking maybe it had slipped off. Nothing. I checked the floor around the casket, the table where we'd placed the guest book. Nothing. I called Ellen's number. It rang 4 times, went to voicemail. "Mrs. Hendricks, this is Ben from Cornerstone Memorial. I need to speak with you about your husband's wedding ring. Could you call me back as soon as possible? Thank you." I waited an hour. No call back. I tried again. Voicemail. At 9:30, I drove to her house, a small ranch about 10 minutes from the funeral home. I'd been there once before when she'd first come in to make arrangements. I rang the doorbell. No answer. Her car was in the driveway. I knocked, waited, knocked again. Finally, a neighbor came out from the house next door. Elderly woman, concerned expression. "Are you looking for Ellen?" she asked. "Yes. Is she home?" "She left yesterday evening. Said she was going to stay with her daughter for a few days. Didn't want to be in the house alone." "Do you know which daughter? I need to reach her about the funeral." The neighbor gave me a number. I thanked her and called it from my car. Ellen's daughter, name was Patricia, answered on the second ring. I'm looking for your mother, I said. I need to speak with her about the service. She's not here, Patricia said. She said she needed some time alone. She's staying at a hotel, I think. Which hotel? I don't know. She didn't say. Is something wrong? I explained about the ring. Patricia was silent for a moment. That doesn't make sense, she said. Mom would never take Dad's ring. She wanted him buried with it. She was very specific about that. Is there any way to reach her? I've been trying. She's not answering her phone. I hung up and sat in my car, staring at the house. Something felt wrong. Not dangerous, just wrong, like a piece of a puzzle that didn't fit. I drove back to the funeral home and rechecked the viewing room. The ring was still missing. I looked at the guest book, flipping through the signatures from the night before. Friends, family, acquaintances, all accounted for. Then I saw the chair, a small upholstered chair positioned near the casket, where Ellen had been sitting for most of the evening, and on the seat of the chair, carefully placed, was Robert's wedding ring. I picked it up, turned it over in my hand. It was warm, not room temperature, warm, like someone had just been wearing it. I checked my watch, 9:50. The graveside service started in 10 minutes. I didn't have time to figure this out. I placed the ring back on Robert's finger, closed the casket, and loaded it into the hearse. The service at Oakmont Cemetery was brief. About 30 people attended. Ellen wasn't there. Patricia stood in for her, explained that her mother wasn't feeling well, that grief had overwhelmed her. People understood. They offered condolences, said prayers, and dispersed. We lowered Robert into the ground at 11:15 a.m. I stayed until the gravediggers had filled in the plot, made sure everything was settled. Then I drove back to the funeral home. Ellen's daughter called me that afternoon. We found her, Patricia said. Her voice was shaking. Is she all right? She's gone. Mom's gone. She died last night. Heart attack, they think. They found her this morning in her hotel room. I sat down at my desk, gripping the phone. What time? I asked. The coroner said probably around 9 p.m. Why? 9 p.m., right around the time I'd left Ellen alone in the viewing room for her final goodbye. I'm so sorry, I said. If there's anything I can do... Actually, Patricia interrupted, there is. We'd like you to handle Mom's service too. She'd want that. We buried Ellen Hendricks 3 days later, right next to Robert. Simple service, just like his. I conducted it personally, made sure everything was perfect. When we lowered her casket into the ground, I noticed something. Her wedding ring was missing. Patricia hadn't mentioned it, but I could see the indentation on her finger through the viewing window we'd left open for the family. I didn't say anything. I just closed the window and let the grave diggers do their work. That evening, I went back to Oakmont Cemetery alone. I walked to the Hendricks plot, 2 fresh graves, side by side, matching headstones. And there, placed carefully on the mound of dirt over Robert's grave, was a single wedding ring. Ellen's ring. I knew it by the inscription on the inside, Forever R. I picked it up, held it in my palm. It was warm. I thought about that last visit, Ellen alone in the viewing room with Robert, 20 minutes of private goodbye. I thought about how her car had been in the driveway, but she hadn't been home. How she'd died around 9 p.m., right when I'd left her alone. And I thought about Robert's ring, placed carefully on the chair where she'd been sitting, not stolen, not lost, returned. I didn't take Ellen's ring. I left it there on Robert's grave where she'd placed it, where it belonged, because some goodbyes don't end when we think they do. Some goodbyes continue in the quiet spaces between life and death, in hotel rooms and viewing rooms and cemetery plots. Some goodbyes take exactly as long as they need to, regardless of what the living world allows. And sometimes, when two people have been together for 56 years, saying goodbye takes a little longer than one night. It takes forever. Temperature shouldn't fluctuate in a place like this. I'm Sarah, and I've worked as a mortuary assistant at Riverside Funeral Services for 2 years. It's technical work, assisting with embalming, maintaining equipment, managing the cold storage units where we keep bodies before preparation or viewing. It's not glamorous, but it's necessary, and I'm good at it. I'm organized, detail oriented, comfortable with the clinical aspects of death. Our facility has 8 refrigeration units, stainless steel drawers built into the wall of our preparation room, each one climate controlled to keep bodies at a consistent 38 degrees Fahrenheit. They're reliable, well maintained, serviced quarterly. In 2 years, I'd never had a problem with them. Until drawer 7, it started on a Monday morning in late October. I arrived at 7 a.m., did my usual checks, reviewed the log to see who was in storage, verified temperatures, made sure everything was sealed properly. Drawers 1 through 6 showed normal readings, 38 degrees. Drawer 7 read 42 degrees. 4 degrees isn't a huge variance, but it's enough to be concerning. Bodies need to stay cold to slow decomposition. I made a note in the maintenance log and adjusted the thermostat for drawer 7, bringing it back down to 38. Tuesday morning, same thing, drawer 7 at 42 degrees. I adjusted it again, checked the door seal, made sure the unit was closing properly. Everything seemed fine. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, every morning, drawer 7 read 42 degrees. I called our maintenance company. They sent a technician on Friday afternoon. He ran diagnostics, checked the compressor, tested the thermostat. Everything tested normal. Could be a sensor issue, he said, but honestly, the unit's functioning fine. Probably just a calibration drift. I'll recalibrate it. He recalibrated the sensor, verified the reading, 38 degrees, and left. Monday morning, drawer 7 read 42 degrees. At this point, I was frustrated. I documented everything meticulously: date, time, temperature readings, maintenance performed. I showed the log to my supervisor, a woman named Dr. Chen, who'd been in the business for 25 years. "Which body is in drawer 7?" she asked. I checked the storage log. Male, age 47. Name is Marcus Delgado. Died unexpectedly at home, pending autopsy results. Been here 4 days. Any issues during intake? None. Standard procedure. She considered this. Move him to a different drawer. See if the temperature issue follows. Tuesday morning, I transferred Marcus Delgado from drawer 7 to drawer 3. I verified the temperatures, all units at 38 degrees. Wednesday morning, drawer 7 was empty. Temperature reading 38 degrees. Drawer 3, where Marcus now was, 38 degrees. Thursday morning, drawer 7, I didn't think the 7 was still empty. Temperature 38 degrees. Friday morning, drawer 7, 42 degrees. The drawer was empty, no body inside, but the temperature had risen 4 degrees. I stood in the preparation room, staring at the digital display on drawer 7. This didn't make sense. Temperature fluctuations are caused by external factors: door left open, seal failure, body temperature affecting the unit. But the drawer was empty. The seal was intact. There was no reason for the temperature to be rising. I opened drawer 7 and examined the interior. Empty stainless steel, clean and cold. I ran my hand along the walls, checking for frost buildup or moisture. Nothing unusual. I closed it, reset the thermostat, and went about my day. That night, I stayed late. I wanted to observe the drawer, see if the temperature rose gradually or all at once. I positioned myself at a prep table with a clear view of the digital display and waited. 8 p.m., 38 degrees. 8:30, 38 degrees. 9 p.m., 38 degrees. 9:30, I heard it. A sound coming from inside drawer 7. Soft, rhythmic. 3 knocks, a pause, 3 more knocks. I stood up slowly, every instinct telling me to leave. The knocking continued. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks, patient and deliberate. I approached the drawer, my hand shaking. The digital display read 40 degrees. As I watched, it ticked up to 41. The knocking stopped. I should have left. I should have called someone, documented this, done anything but what I did next. But I couldn't help it. I reached for the handle and pulled open drawer 7. Empty. Just cold stainless steel and the soft hum of the refrigeration unit. But the temperature display read 42 degrees. I closed the drawer and stepped back. The knocking resumed immediately. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks. I grabbed my phone and recorded it. 15 seconds of clear, distinct knocking coming from inside an empty refrigeration unit. Then it stopped. I didn't stay any longer. I left the prep room, locked the door, and went home. The next morning, I showed the recording to Dr. Chen. She listened without expression, then replayed it twice more. "You're sure drawer 7 was empty when you recorded this?" "Positive. I opened it. Nothing inside." She was quiet for a long moment. "Pull the intake records for Marcus Delgado. I want to know everything about how he died." I pulled the file. Marcus Delgado, 47, found deceased in his home by his brother. Preliminary cause of death, asphyxiation. No signs of foul play, but autopsy was ordered to determine if it was accidental or medical. The autopsy had been conducted 3 days after intake. Results were pending. Dr. Chen read the file carefully. Where was he found? I scanned the intake notes. Locked storage unit. His brother hadn't heard from him in 2 days. Went to check on him. Marcus had been living in the storage units temporarily after losing his apartment. Door was locked from the outside. Temperature inside was over 90 then. Degrees. She looked at me. He was trapped. I felt cold. The report says the lock malfunctioned. He couldn't get out. How long was he in there? Medical examiner estimated 36 to 48 hours before death. We both looked at the refrigeration unit. Drawer 7. Temperature reading 42 degrees. 3 knocks, Dr. Chen said quietly. Pause. 3 knocks. What does that mean? That's what you do when you're trapped. You knock. You try to get someone's attention. You hope someone hears you. The knocking started again. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks. Clear and deliberate, coming from inside drawer 7. Dr. Chen walked to the drawer and placed her hand flat against the stainless steel door. Marcus, she said quietly, you're not trapped anymore. You're free. You can go. The knocking continued. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks. Marcus, listen to me. You died. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry you died alone and scared. But you're not in that storage unit anymore. You're safe. You can leave now. The knocking stopped. The temperature display on drawer 7 ticked down. 42, 41, 40, 39, 38. It stabilized at 38 degrees. We stood there in silence, watching the display. It didn't move, just stayed steady at 38 degrees, exactly where it should be. He was knocking for help, I said. For 2 days, he was knocking, and no one heard him. Dr. Chen nodded, and then he did it again here, just to see if anyone would listen this time. We never had another problem with drawer 7. The temperature stayed consistent. The unit functioned perfectly. Marcus Delgado was released to his family after the autopsy, cremated per his documented wishes. But sometimes, late at night when I'm doing equipment checks, I pause at drawer 7 and listen. Not because I expect to hear anything, just because someone should. Someone should always be listening, just in case. Some choices matter more than we know. I'm Rachel, and I've been an embalmer at Meadowbrook Funeral Home for 8 years. It's precise work, preparing the deceased for viewing, making sure they look peaceful and dignified for their families. Dressing, makeup, positioning, everything has to be perfect. Families remember these final images forever, and I take that responsibility seriously. We received a case on a Wednesday afternoon. Teenage girl named Amanda Clark, 16 years old, car accident. Her parents were devastated, barely functional. The mother could hardly speak when making arrangements. She brought in a dress for Amanda to wear, a lavender gown, beautiful and age appropriate, the kind of dress a girl might wear to prom. She said Amanda had picked it out herself for homecoming, but never got to wear it. I prepared Amanda with extra care. Young deaths are always harder, for the families, for us. I wanted everything to be perfect. I embalmed her, set her features gently, applied minimal makeup to make her look natural. Then I dressed her in the lavender gown. It fit perfectly. She looked peaceful, like she was sleeping. I positioned her in the casket around 4 p.m., did a final check of her appearance, and left her in the preparation room to set. The viewing wasn't until the next afternoon. Standard practice. We prepare them the day before, let everything settle overnight, do a final check in the morning before the family arrives. I went home around 6. exhausted emotionally. Young deaths take a toll. The next morning, I arrived at 7:30 to do my final preparations. I walked into the prep room, approached Amanda's casket, and stopped. She wasn't wearing the lavender dress. She was wearing a white dress, old-fashioned, high-necked, with long sleeves and a ruffled collar. The fabric looked vintage, slightly yellowed with age, and there were stains on it, dark, water-like marks around the hem and sleeves. I stood there, frozen, trying to process what I was seeing. This wasn't the dress we'd put on her. This wasn't even a dress from our inventory. I checked the preparation log. I'd documented everything yesterday, including the lavender gown. This white dress had appeared overnight. I looked around the prep room. No one else was in the building yet. I'd unlocked the doors myself when I arrived. No signs of forced entry, no indication anyone had been here. I checked Amanda's face. Still peaceful, still perfectly prepared, but the dress, this strange stained white dress, that was wrong, that was impossible. I called my supervisor immediately, a man named Mr. Dawson, been in the business for 30 years. He arrived within 20 minutes, looked at Amanda, looked at me. This isn't the dress the family brought, I said, my voice shaking. I dressed her in a lavender gown yesterday. I documented it. This isn't our dress. He examined the white dress carefully, touching the fabric. It's real, he said quietly. Old, but real. Not a costume, not a cheap reproduction. This is a genuine vintage dress, probably from the 1920s or 30s. How did it get here? He didn't answer. He just pulled out his phone and took photos, then walked to his office. I followed. He pulled up our security footage. We have cameras throughout the building, including one positioned to cover the prep room door. We watched the footage from the previous evening. I left at 6:08 p.m. The prep room door closed behind me. The timestamp ticked forward. 6:30, 7, 8, 9 p.m. The door never opened. No one entered or exited. The hallway remained empty all night. Check the room itself, Mr. Dawson said. We didn't have a camera inside the prep room. Privacy concerns for the deceased. But we had one covering the exterior window. He pulled up that footage. The window remained closed all night. No one approached it from outside. So how? I started. I don't know, he said. He looked at me seriously. Have you undressed her? Checked the lavender gown? No, I called you immediately. We walked back to the prep room together. Mr. Dawson carefully, respectfully, began to remove the white dress. I assisted, trying to be as gentle as possible. Underneath, Amanda was wearing undergarments, the same ones I'd dressed her in yesterday. The lavender gown was gone completely. We searched the entire prep room, checked cabinets, drawers, the laundry hamper. Nothing. The dress had vanished. Mr. Dawson examined the white dress more closely. He pointed to a small embroidered tag on the inside collar, a name stitched in faded thread, Emma Clark. Clark, I said. That's Amanda's last name. He nodded slowly. I'll check our records. You redress her in something from our inventory, something neutral and appropriate. The family will be here in 4 hours. I found a simple blue dress from our stock, similar in style to what Amanda would have worn. I dressed her carefully, checked everything twice, and positioned her in the casket. She looked peaceful again, proper again, but I couldn't shake the image of that white dress, those water stains, that embroidered name. Mr. Dawson called me to his office an hour later. He'd been going through our historical records. We keep files dating back to the funeral home's founding in 1922. He had a folder open on his desk. Emma Clark, he said, died March 19th, 1934, age 16, drowning accident, viewing and burial handled by this funeral home. I felt cold. Same last name, same age. I checked further back. Emma was Amanda's great-great aunt, her father's grandfather's sister. Did the family know? Probably not. It's not something that would come up in casual conversation, a teenage relative who died 90 years ago. He showed me a photo from the file, grainy, black and white, but clear enough. Emma Clark in her casket, wearing a white dress with a high neck and ruffled collar, the same dress Amanda had been wearing this morning. Why would... I couldn't finish the question. There was no rational explanation. Mr. Dawson closed the folder. Sometimes the dead look after each other, especially family, especially the young ones who died too soon. You think I think Emma Clark drowned 90 years ago and was buried in that dress. I think Amanda Clark died too young in a car accident, and I think somehow, across time and death, Emma wanted to share something with her. He looked at me, or maybe she just wanted Amanda to know she wasn't alone, that someone from the family had walked this path before. The viewing went perfectly. Amanda looked beautiful in the blue dress. Her parents were grateful, said she looked peaceful. Her friends came, cried, shared memories. It was a proper goodbye. But that night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that white dress, about Emma Clark drowning in 1934, about Amanda dying in a car accident 90 years later, about how they'd both been 16, about how death had taken them at the same age, in different eras, but somehow they'd been connected. The next morning, I arrived at the funeral home early. The burial was scheduled for 10 a.m. I went to the prep room to do a final check before we transported Amanda to the cemetery. She was wearing the white dress again, not the blue dress I'd put on her yesterday. The white vintage dress, water-stained and old, with Emma's name embroidered on the collar. This time, I didn't panic. I didn't call Mr. Dawson. I just stood there, looking at Amanda in Emma's dress, and I understood. This was how it was supposed to be. This was right. I covered the casket with a pall, a decorative cloth we drape over caskets during transport and burial. The family wouldn't see the dress. They'd never know. But Emma would know, and maybe Amanda, wherever she was, would know too. We buried Amanda Clark that morning in a dress that was 90 years old, worn by a great-great aunt she'd never met, connected by blood and age, and the tragedy of dying too young. After the burial, I went back to the funeral home and pulled Emma's file. I read through everything, the circumstances of her death, the details of her service, the band of her mourners. At the bottom of the file, there was a note, handwritten in faded ink. Emma was buried in her favorite dress. She was supposed to wear it to her 16th birthday party. She never got the chance. I closed the file and put it away. Some dresses are meant to be worn, some are meant to be shared, and some are meant to connect two girls who died decades apart, giving them both the chance to wear something beautiful one last time, even if no one else ever sees it, even if it only matters to them. The ground holds more than we bury in it. I'm Luis, and I've been a gravedigger at Pinewood Memorial Park for 7 years. It's hard work, physical, solitary, but honest. I dig the graves, prepare the plots, lower the caskets. I'm part of the process that lets families say goodbye and lets the dead find rest. It's important work, even if people don't think about it much. Pinewood's been around since the late 1800s. The older sections are up the hill where the original plots were established. Marble markers, stone angels, names worn smooth by a century of weather. Most of those graves haven't been opened in decades. They're part of history now, people who lived and died before anyone currently alive was born. I got assigned to dig a new plot in the old section on a Tuesday morning, row 17, space 43, right next to marker 14. The funeral director said it was a special request from the family. The deceased's great-grandfather was buried nearby, and they wanted to keep the family together. That happens sometimes. People like continuity, even in death. I loaded my equipment into the truck, shovel, pick, measuring tape, safety cones, and drove up to the old section. Found marker 14 easily enough. Child's grave, small headstone, with a lamb carved on top. The inscription was weathered, but still legible. Mary Louise Douglas, beloved daughter, April 2nd, 1882, November 8th, 1889, age 7 years, gone but not forgotten. Next to it, where I was supposed to dig, the ground was overgrown with grass and weeds. No marker, no indication anyone was buried there. I set up my equipment, measured out the plot dimensions, standard adult grave, 6 feet deep, 3 feet wide, 8 feet long, and started digging. The ground was soft at first, topsoil, easy to move. But about 2 feet down, my shovel hit something solid, not rock, not roots, wood. I stopped, brushed away the dirt with my gloved hands. It was definitely wood, old, dark, but intact. Looked like part of a coffin lid. I pulled out my phone and called the office. The funeral director, guy named Mr. Harrison, answered on the second ring. Harrison, it's Luis. I'm up in the old section, digging plot 1743. I hit something. Looks like a casket. How deep? 2 feet, maybe less. Silence on the other end. Then, that's not right. There's no burial registered at that location. I'm telling you, there's a casket here. Don't dig any further. I'm coming up. He arrived 20 minutes later with the cemetery records, a large leather-bound book that documented every burial since Pinewood opened in 1876. We stood next to the partial hole I'd dug, and he flipped through the pages. Row 17, space 43, he muttered. Should be empty. We sold it to the Hendricks family last month. He looked at marker 14, then back at the records. Space 14 is Mary Louise Douglas, died 1889. Space 15 is her mother, Catherine Douglas, died 1892. But there's nothing listed for Space 43. I pointed to the exposed wood. Then what's that? He knelt down, examined it closely. It's a coffin, child-sized, based on the dimensions. He looked at me. Keep digging, carefully. I need to see what we're dealing with. I continued digging, moving dirt away from the wooden surface. It took me another hour to fully expose the coffin. It was small, maybe 4 feet long, 2 feet wide, child-sized, like Mr. Harrison had said. The wood was pine, plain, and unadorned. No nameplate, no decorative handles, just a simple box. Should we open it? I asked. Mr. Harrison was quiet for a long time. We have to. If there's an unregistered burial here, we need to document it. The Hendricks family needs to know what they're dealing with. I used my crowbar to carefully pry open the lid. The nails were rusted, but still held. It took several minutes of careful work before the lid finally loosened. Mr. Harrison helped me lift it off. Inside was a child, or what had been a child. The body was mostly skeletal, bones wrapped in the remnants of a white dress, small shoes still intact on the feet. But what caught my attention was the position. The skeleton wasn't lying flat. It was curled up, knees pulled to chest, hands near the face, like she'd been trying to make herself small, like she'd been trying to hide. And the inside of the coffin lid, the part that had been facing down, was covered in scratches, deep gouges in the wood, running in all directions, finger-width marks, desperate and chaotic. Mr. Harrison made a sound, something between a gasp and a sob. Christ, he whispered, she was alive. I looked at the scratches, at the curled position of the skeleton, at the small bones of the hands that had clawed at the wood. How is that possible? They would have checked. They would have made sure. Not always, not back then. He pulled off his hat, ran a hand through his hair. In the late 1800s, they didn't have the medical knowledge we have now. Sometimes people fell into comas or had conditions that mimicked death, and sometimes they buried people who weren't actually dead. I looked at marker 14. Mary Louise Douglas died 1889. Then looked at the coffin we'd just opened, positioned directly beneath where I'd been about to dig. You think this is Mary? I asked. No, Mr. Harrison said quietly. Mary's buried in Space 14. We've never had reason to exhume that grave, but the records are clear. He looked at the scratched coffin lid. This is someone else, someone who died, really died, trying to get out of this coffin, someone who was buried without a marker, without a record, without anyone knowing she was here. Why would they do that? Shame, maybe, or fear. If a family realized they'd buried someone alive, if they found out after it was too late. He stopped. They might have buried the evidence, literally. We stood there in silence, looking at the small coffin and its terrible contents. The bones of a child who'd woken up in the dark, trapped and terrified, scratching at wood until her fingers broke and she suffocated or starved or went mad with fear. What do we do? I asked. We report it. The county will send someone, medical examiner, maybe police. They'll document everything, try to identify her. He carefully replaced the coffin lid, and we cancel the Hendricks burial. We can't put someone on top of this. Not now, not knowing what we know. The county medical examiner arrived that afternoon, a woman named Dr. Reeves. She examined the coffin, photographed everything, carefully removed the remains for analysis. She confirmed what we'd suspected. The child had been buried alive, probably in the late 1800s, based on the clothing and coffin construction. The scratches on the lid were consistent with someone trying to escape. Cause of death was likely asphyxiation. They ran tests, tried to identify her through historical records and genealogical research. It took 3 weeks. Finally, Dr. Reeves called Mr. Harrison with the results. "We found a match," she said. "DNA comparison with descendants in the area. Her name was Elizabeth Douglas, younger sister of Mary Louise Douglas. She's not in any cemetery records because she was never officially buried." Why not? Because according to the death records we found, Elizabeth died of scarlet fever in November of 1889, 3 weeks after Mary died. The parents lost both daughters within a month, but there's no burial record for Elizabeth, no grave marker, no documentation. It's like she just disappeared. "Until now," Mr. Harrison said. "Until now." They reburied Elizabeth properly, gave her a marked grave next to her sister Mary, held a small ceremony with the descendants present. The Hendricks family was moved to a different plot, and Space 43 was permanently retired. No one would ever be buried there again. But I think about Elizabeth sometimes, about how she woke up in that coffin in the dark and knew what had happened, about how she scratched and clawed and screamed for help that never came, about how her parents, already devastated by Mary's death, made a terrible mistake and then buried the evidence next to their other daughter's grave, hoping no one would ever find out. And I think about those scratches on the inside of the coffin lid, how desperate they were, how many there were, how long she must have fought before she finally stopped. Some secrets stay buried for 100 years, and some get found by a gravedigger's shovel 2 feet down, right where you're supposed to be digging someone else's grave, right where someone knew you'd find them eventually. Some people never stop looking. I'm Hiroshi, and I've been cemetery manager at Oak Ridge Memorial Gardens for 14 years. It's administrative work mostly, maintaining records, coordinating burials, helping families navigate the grounds. We have over 2,000 plots spread across 40 acres, organized into sections with pathways and gardens. It's easy to get lost if you don't know the layout. That's why we have information kiosks positioned throughout the property, maps, directories, help buttons for visitors who need guidance. The main kiosk is near the entrance, under a covered pavilion. It's where I spend most of my time during visiting hours, answering questions, giving directions, helping people find their loved ones' graves. It's peaceful work. Most people are quiet, respectful, focused on their own grief. I first noticed her on a foggy morning in early November. The fog was thick that day, reducing visibility to maybe 20 feet. I was at the main kiosk, updating the directory, when I saw an elderly woman standing at the edge of the pavilion. She was small, thin, wearing a long gray coat and a headscarf. She didn't approach the desk, just stood there, looking uncertain. "Good morning," I called out. "Can I help you find someone?" She turned toward me slowly. Her face was pale, deeply lined, with dark eyes that seemed unfocused. "I'm looking for the Douglas plot," she said. Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper. "Of course. Let me check the directory." I pulled up the map on my computer. Douglas was a common name. We had 8 different Douglas family plots in the cemetery. "Do you have a first name?" "William," she said. "William Douglas." I found it. Section G, row 12, plot 34. I printed out a small map, highlighted the route, and handed it to her. "Just follow the main path east, take the second left, and it will be on your right, about a 5-minute walk." She took the map, nodded, and walked away into the fog. I watched her disappear down the path, then went back to my work. The next foggy morning, about a week later, she was there again. Same gray coat, same headscarf, same uncertain expression. I recognized her immediately. "Good morning," I said. "Looking for the Douglas plot again?" She looked at me like she didn't remember our previous conversation. "Yes, William Douglas. Can you help me?" I gave her the same directions, printed another map. She thanked me and walked away. This continued for 6 weeks. Every foggy morning, she appeared at the kiosk, asked for directions to the Douglas plot, and I walked her there. I started doing that after the 3rd time. I figured she had memory issues, maybe early dementia, and I didn't want her getting lost in the fog. The walk took about 10 minutes round trip. I'd show her to William Douglas's grave, a simple headstone, weathered granite, dates indicating he'd died in 1973, and she'd stand there quietly for a few minutes. Then I'd walk her back to the entrance. She never spoke during these walks, never asked questions, never shared memories of William, just walked silently beside me, visited the grave, and left. On the 6th week, as I was walking her back to the entrance, I tried to make conversation. "Did you know William well?" I asked gently. "Yes," she said. "Were you family?" She didn't answer right away. Then, "I was supposed to meet him." "Here? At the cemetery?" "No, before. I was supposed to meet him before." I didn't understand, but I didn't push. Memory issues can make people confused about time and place. I just walked her to the entrance, made sure she left safely, and went back to work. The 7th week, something changed. She arrived on a foggy Tuesday morning, same as always, but this time, when I walked her to the Douglas plot, she didn't just stand there. She knelt down, placed her hand on the headstone, and spoke. "I'm sorry I'm late," she said quietly. "I tried to find you. I've been trying." I stood a respectful distance away, not wanting to intrude. She stayed there for maybe 5 minutes, her hand on the stone, her head bowed. Then she stood up and looked at me. "Thank you for helping me," she said. "I couldn't find him without you." "You're welcome. Do you need help getting back to the entrance?" "No," she said. "I remember now." She walked away into the fog. I watched her go, feeling uneasy for reasons I couldn't explain. Then I walked back to the kiosk and tried to shake off the feeling. That afternoon, I did something I probably shouldn't have done. I pulled up William Douglas's burial record on my computer. William Douglas died September 15th, 1973, age 48. Burial October 2nd, 1973. Oh, surviving family listed, no regular visitors in the 40 plus years since his burial. I checked our visitor logs. We ask people to sign in, though it's not mandatory. I scrolled through the past 6 weeks, looking for any signature that might belong to the elderly woman. Nothing. No one had signed in on the foggy mornings when she'd visited. I checked our security footage. We have cameras at the entrance and main pathways. I pulled up footage from her most recent visit, Tuesday morning. The timestamp showed her arriving at the kiosk at 8:15 a.m. I could see myself greeting her, printing the map, starting to walk with her towards section G. But on the camera, I was walking alone. I rewound the footage, watched it again. Same thing. I was clearly talking to someone, gesturing, walking at a pace that suggested someone was beside me, but the camera showed only me walking alone through the fog, stopping at William Douglas's grave, standing there for several minutes, then walking back. I checked footage from the previous weeks. Every foggy morning, same pattern. I appeared on camera, alone, walking to the Douglas plot and back. But I'd seen her, I'd spoken with her, I'd walked beside her. She was real. I sat at my desk, staring at the monitor, trying to process this. Then I did something else I probably shouldn't have done. I searched our historical records for any connection to William Douglas. Newspaper obituaries, death certificates, anything that might explain who the woman was. I found it in a newspaper archive from September 1973. A brief article about William Douglas's death, heart attack, died at work, no immediate family. But there was another article from the same week about a woman named Helen Morrison, age 45, who died in a car accident on September 16th, 1973, one day after William Douglas died. The article mentioned that Helen had been on her way to meet someone, a man she'd been writing letters to for 6 months, someone she'd met through a newspaper pen pal column. They'd never met in person, but they'd planned to meet for the first time that weekend. She died in the accident. He'd died the day before of a heart attack, never knowing she was coming. I looked up Helen Morrison's burial records. She was buried at Riverside Cemetery, about 10 miles away. Not here, not at Oak Ridge, but every foggy morning she came here, looking for William, asking for directions to his grave, trying to make that meeting she'd promised 50 years ago. The next foggy morning, she appeared again. I saw her clearly, gray coat, headscarf, pale face, standing at the edge of the pavilion, waiting. "Good morning, Helen," I said quietly. She looked at me, and for the first time, she smiled. "You know my name." "Yes, I know you've been looking for William. I know you've been trying to find him." "I'm late," she said. "I was supposed to meet him 50 years ago, but I never made it." "I know, but you're here now. You found him." She nodded. "Because of you, you helped me find him." "Would you like me to walk with you one more time?" "Yes, please." I walked her to William Douglas's grave, Same route as always. This time, when we arrived, she knelt down and placed both hands on the headstone. "I'm here, William," she said. "I'm finally here. I'm sorry it took so long." She stayed there for a long time. I stood nearby, watching the fog swirl around us, watching this woman, who died 50 years ago, finally keep a promise she'd made to a man who'd never known she was trying. Finally, she stood up. "I can go now," she said. "Are you sure?" "Yes. He knows I came. He knows I tried." She looked at me. "Thank you, Hiroshi, for helping me find him, for walking with me." "You're welcome, Helen." She turned and walked away into the fog. This time, I didn't follow. I just watched until she disappeared, becoming part of the gray morning, becoming nothing but memory and mist. I checked the security footage later that day. Same as always. I was walking alone, standing alone at the grave, talking to empty air. But I'd seen her, I'd spoken with her, I'd helped her find what she'd been searching for. I never saw Helen Morrison again. But every foggy morning, I check the kiosk just in case someone else is lost, looking for a grave they never got to visit, trying to keep a promise they never got to fulfill. Because sometimes the dead need help finding their way, and sometimes they just need someone to walk beside them, even if no one else can see them, even if the cameras show you walking alone. Routine has a way of making you forget to pay attention. I'm Wes, and I've been a cemetery caretaker at Maplewood Memorial for 9 years. It's straightforward work, maintaining the grounds during the day, locking up at night. I'm the closer most evenings, which means I do a final walkthrough, make sure all visitors have left, secure the gates, and head home. It's a routine I've done hundreds of times. Drive the perimeter road, check the sections, lock the main gates, leave through the service exit, 20 minutes tops. Maplewood is a big cemetery, 120 acres, with a single access road that loops through the property. The main gates face the public road on the west side. The service exit, where staff enter and leave, is on the east side, connected to the same loop. At closing time, I lock the main gates first, then drive the loop to make sure that everything's clear, then exit through the service gate and lock it behind me. Simple, routine, safe. On a Tuesday evening in late September, I did my usual closing procedure. Locked the main gates at 6 p.m. Dusk was settling in, the sky going purple and gray. I got in my truck and started driving the access road loop. It's a wide gravel road, well maintained, with sections branching off to different parts of the cemetery. I drove slowly, checking each section as I passed. Everything looked normal: empty pathways, quiet graves, a few flowers wilting in the evening air. I was about halfway around the loop, near the older section, when I saw headlights in my rearview mirror. I slowed down, confused. The main gates were locked. No one should be behind me. I checked the mirror again. Definitely headlights. Maybe 50 yards back, following the same road, moving at the same speed I was. I pulled over to let them pass, figuring maybe another staff member was doing a final check. But the vehicle behind me pulled over too, just stopped, headlights still on, maintaining the same distance. I put my truck in park and got out. The other vehicle, I couldn't see what kind, just the headlights cutting through the dusk, didn't move. I walked toward it, holding up a hand in greeting. Maybe someone had gotten locked in, needed help getting out. I got about 20 feet from my truck when the headlights turned off. I stopped, waiting for a door to open, for someone to get out and explain. Nothing happened, just darkness where the headlights had been and the sound of my own breathing. "Hello?" I called out. My voice sounded thin in the empty cemetery. "Do you need help?" No response. I stood there for another 30 seconds, feeling increasingly uneasy, then walked back to my truck. I got in, started driving again, watching the rearview mirror. Nothing behind me, just empty road and gathering darkness. I continued around the loop, checking over my shoulder every few seconds. No headlights, no vehicle. Whatever had been there was gone. I reached the service exit, unlocked the gate, drove through, and locked it behind me. Standard procedure. I sat in my truck for a moment, trying to rationalize what I'd seen. Maybe it had been a reflection, my own headlights bouncing off something. Maybe I'd been tired, my eyes playing tricks. I drove home and tried not to think about it. The next evening, same routine. Lock the main gates at 6, drive the loop, exit through the service gate. Everything normal until I was about halfway around the loop, same spot as the night before, near the older section. Headlights appeared in my rearview mirror, same distance, maybe 50 yards back, following me at the same speed. I felt cold. This wasn't a coincidence. I accelerated, driving faster than I normally would on the gravel road. The headlights behind me accelerated too, maintaining the exact same distance. I slowed down. The headlights slowed down. I stopped completely. The headlights stopped. I grabbed my phone, ready to call the police. But what would I tell them? Someone was driving behind me, inside a locked cemetery? They'd think I was crazy. I put the truck in reverse, backing up toward the headlights. If someone was following me, I wanted to see who it was, wanted to confront them. I reversed maybe 20 feet, closing the distance. The headlights turned off again. I stopped, left my truck running, got out with my flashlight. I walked toward where the headlights had been, sweeping the flashlight beam across the road. Nothing. No vehicle, no tire tracks in the gravel, no indication anything had been there. Just empty road and the dark shapes of headstones on either side. I walked back to my truck, got in, and continued driving. My hands were shaking. I drove straight to the service exit, unlocked it, and left. I sat in the parking lot outside the cemetery, watching the locked gates, trying to understand what was happening. Third night, I considered calling in sick, but I couldn't. I needed this job, and I wasn't going to let fear keep me from doing it. I told myself I'd been imagining things, that stress or fatigue was making me see things that weren't there. I locked the main gates at 6 p.m. and started driving the loop. I was tense, watching the rearview mirror constantly. I reached the halfway point, the older section, and sure enough, headlights appeared behind me. This time, I didn't stop. I didn't slow down or speed up. I just kept driving at a steady pace, watching the headlights follow me. They maintained the same distance, never getting closer, never falling back. Just there, constant and patient, following me around the access road. I thought about the layout of the cemetery. The access road is a complete loop. If you stay on it, you'll eventually come back to where you started, which meant the vehicle behind me should have entered the loop at some point. But I'd driven this route hundreds of times. There was no place for a vehicle to enter except through the main gates or the service exit, both of which were locked, unless the vehicle had already been inside when I locked the gates, unless it had been waiting. I continued driving, my mind racing. If someone had been inside when I locked up, they'd be trapped. They'd need me to unlock the service exit to get out, which meant they were following me to the exit, waiting for me to open the gate so they could leave too. But that didn't make sense. Why follow at a distance? Why turn off the headlights when I approached? Why not just flag me down and ask for help? I reached the service exit, slowed down to unlock the gate. The headlights behind me slowed down too. I put my truck in park, left the engine running, and got out with the keys. I unlocked the gate, swung it open, then turned to look at the road behind me. The headlights were maybe 30 yards away now, stopped, waiting. I could see them clearly. Standard headlight configuration, white yellow light cutting through the darkness, but I still couldn't see the vehicle itself, just the lights floating in the dark. "You can go ahead," I called out. "Gates open." The headlights didn't move. I stood there for a full minute, waiting. The headlights remained stationary. Finally, I got back in my truck, drove through the service exit, and parked just outside. I got out and stood by the open gate, waiting to see what would come through. Nothing. The road inside the cemetery was empty. No headlights, no vehicle, nothing. I closed the gate, locked it, and drove home. I didn't sleep well that night. The fourth night, I brought someone with me, a guy named Marcus, who worked maintenance. I told him I'd been seeing something weird during closings, asked if he'd ride along. He agreed, probably thought I was being paranoid, but he came anyway. We locked the main gates together, then got in my truck and started the loop. I told Marcus to watch the rearview mirror, told him what to look for. We drove in silence, both of us tense. Halfway around the loop, near the older section, I checked the mirror. "You see anything?" Marcus looked. "No, nothing behind us." "You sure?" "Yeah, road's empty." But I could see them, the headlights, maybe 50 yards back, following at the same speed, clear as day in my rearview mirror. "Marcus, look again. The headlights, right there." He turned around in his seat, looked out the back window. "Wes, there's nothing there. Road's completely empty." I looked in the mirror again. The headlights were still there, still following. I looked over my shoulder, out the back window. The road was empty, dark and empty. But in the mirror, the headlights were there. "Pull over," Marcus said quietly. "Something's wrong with you. You need to—" I pulled over. The headlights in my mirror pulled over too. I looked over my shoulder. Nothing. I looked in the mirror. Headlights, clear and steady. "I can see them," I said. "Right there in the mirror. You can't see them." "Wes, there's nothing there." I got out of the truck, walked around to the back, and stood in the road looking at where the headlights should be. Nothing. just empty road. I walked back to the driver's side and looked in the side mirror. The headlights were there, maybe 40 yards back now, waiting. Marcus drove us to the service exit. I sat in the passenger seat, not trusting myself. The headlights followed us the whole way. I could see them in the mirror, but Marcus saw nothing. We exited the cemetery, locked up, and sat in the parking lot. Marcus looked at me seriously. You need to see someone, man. A doctor. This isn't normal. I know what I saw. In a mirror, not in reality. That's a hallucination, Wes. That's not good. I didn't argue. What could I say? That I was being followed by phantom headlights that only appeared in mirrors? That I was being haunted by something that only I could see? I took 3 days off. I told my supervisor I was sick, which wasn't entirely a lie. I spent those days researching, trying to understand what was happening. I looked up the history of Maplewood Memorial, read through old records, tried to find any incident that might explain phantom vehicles or accidents on the access road. I found something, a newspaper article from 1978. A woman named Catherine Wells had been visiting her husband's grave at Maplewood one evening. She'd stayed too late after closing, and when she tried to leave, she found the main gates locked. She'd driven around the access road loop, looking for another exit, but there wasn't one. She'd driven in circles for hours, panicking, eventually running out of gas. She'd spent the night trapped inside the cemetery. They'd found her the next morning, still in her car, dead from a heart attack. The coroner said it was brought on by extreme stress and panic. She'd died thinking she was trapped forever. I went back to work on the 5th day. I did my evening closing routine, same as always. Locked the main gates, drove the loop. When the headlights appeared in my rearview mirror, I didn't pull over. I didn't stop. I just kept driving, watching them follow me, and when I reached the service exit, I did something different. Instead of unlocking the gate and leaving, I put my truck in park and got out. I stood by the gate and looked at my side mirror. The headlights were there, 30 yards back, waiting. Catherine, I said quietly, the gate's unlocked. You can leave now. You're not trapped anymore. The headlights didn't move. I know you're scared. I know you think you can't get out. But the gate's open. You can go. You can finally leave. I unlocked the service gate and swung it wide open. Then I got back in my truck, adjusted my mirror so I could see the road behind me, and waited. Slowly, the headlights started moving. They approached the service exit, passed through the open gate, and continued down the road outside the cemetery. I watched them in my mirror until they disappeared around a bend. Then they were gone. I closed the gate, locked it, and drove home. Haven't seen the headlights since. The road stays empty now. The mirrors show only what's really there. But sometimes, on quiet evenings when I'm locking up, I think about Catherine Wells, about how she drove in circles, trapped and terrified, until her heart gave out, about how she'd been stuck there for 47 years, driving the same loop every night, looking for an exit that was always locked, about how sometimes all someone needs is for you to open the gate and tell them they can leave, even if they've been dead for half a century, even if they're only visible in mirrors. We record everything for the families. I'm Park, Director Park, officially, though most people just call me Ms. Park. I've been a funeral director at Harmony Memorial Services for 12 years. We're a modern facility, fully equipped with everything families need during their most difficult times. One of our services is video recording. We record funeral services for family members who can't attend, or for those who want to revisit the service later. It's a common request now. People want to preserve these moments, even the sad ones. We have professional equipment, cameras mounted discreetly throughout the chapel, high quality microphones, editing software. I handle most of the recordings myself. I'm careful about it, respectful. These are intimate, emotional moments, and I treat them with the gravity they deserve. We had a service scheduled for a man named Gerald Thompson, 68 years old, died after a long battle with cancer. His family requested a full recording, viewing, service, everything. His daughter lived overseas and couldn't travel in time for the funeral. I positioned the cameras, checked the audio levels, made sure everything was ready. The service was scheduled for 2 p.m. on a Saturday. The viewing had been the evening before, and the family had requested that the casket remain open during the service. Not uncommon for families who want that final visual goodbye. The service proceeded normally. About 50 people attended, family, friends, colleagues from Gerald's years working as an accountant. His brother delivered the eulogy, standing at the podium next to the casket, speaking about Gerald's kindness, his dedication to family, his quiet humor. It was a good eulogy, personal, heartfelt, honest. I monitored the recording from my office, making sure everything was capturing properly. The brother's voice was clear, the camera angles were good, the audio was balanced, professional quality, just as the family had requested. The service concluded around the 3 p.m. We closed the casket, transported Gerald to the cemetery, completed the burial. Standard procedure, everything by the book. That evening, I went home feeling satisfied that we'd given the family a proper service. The next morning, I came in early to edit the recording. The family wanted a finished video within a few days so they could send it to the overseas daughter. I loaded the footage into my editing software and started from the beginning. The viewing portion looked fine. People arriving, greeting each other, approaching the casket. I scrubbed through it quickly, just checking for any technical issues. The lighting was good, the audio was clean. I moved on to the service itself. I watched the brother stand at the podium and begin the eulogy. His voice was clear. My brother Gerald was a kind man, a patient man, a man who believed in doing right by people. I was only half paying attention, mostly watching for visual or audio glitches when I heard it, as a sunset whisper, quiet but distinct, coming through the audio clearly, right in the middle of the eulogy. He's not in there. I stopped the playback, rewound, and listened again. The brother was speaking, a man who believed in doing right by people. And underneath his voice, close to the microphone, a whisper, "He's not in there." I felt cold. I checked the audio levels, looked at the waveform. The whisper was definitely there, recorded as clearly as the brother's voice, but no one had been near the microphone except the brother. The podium mic was isolated, positioned specifically to capture only the speaker. I rewound further, started from the beginning of the eulogy. I listened carefully, watching the video and monitoring the audio. The brother spoke for about 6 minutes. At three different points during his speech, the whisper appeared. At 1 minute, 40 seconds, he's not in there. At 3 minutes, 12 seconds, he's not in there. At 5 minutes, 8 seconds, he's not in there. Same voice each time, same cadence, same quiet, urgent tone. I checked the other microphones we'd had positioned throughout the chapel, one near the guest seating, one near the entrance, one aimed at the casket area for ambient audio. Nothing. The whisper only appeared on the podium microphone, the one closest to the person speaking. I pulled up the raw video footage, watched the brother's face as he delivered the eulogy. He showed no indication of hearing anything, no pause, no distraction, no change in expression, just steady, emotional speech about his brother. I zoomed in on the background of the shot, looking for anyone who might have been standing near the podium. No one. The chapel was arranged with the podium at the front, the casket to its right, seating for attendees behind. No one was close enough to the microphone to have made that sound. I exported just the audio and listened to it with headphones, volume turned up. The whisper was male, I thought, hoarse, like someone speaking through a damaged throat, and it was close, not whispered from across the room, but spoken directly into the microphone. He's not in there. I played it for my assistant, a woman named Jennifer, who'd been working with us for 5 years. She listened, her expression growing increasingly disturbed. Where was that recorded from? She asked. The podium microphone, but no one else was. I know. She listened to it again. It sounds like it's coming from inside the casket. I hadn't thought of that, but now that she'd said it, I couldn't unhear it. The position of the microphone, the way the sound had been captured, it could have been coming from the casket, which had been positioned maybe 4 feet from the podium. That's impossible, I said. The casket was sealed 3 days before the service. We verified it. I was there. I'm just telling you what it sounds like. I dismissed her and sat alone in my office, staring at the audio waveform 3 times. During the eulogy, someone or something had whispered into our microphone 3 times the same message. He's not in there. I called the cemetery, spoke to the groundskeeper who'd overseen Gerald's burial. I asked if there had been any issues during the interment, anything unusual. He said no. Standard burial, no complications. The family had left, the grave had been filled, the marker would be placed the following week. Was the casket sealed? I asked. Of course. We verified before lowering. Why? No reason, just checking records. I hung up and sat there, thinking. The casket had been sealed. Gerald had been inside. We'd buried him yesterday. Everything had proceeded normally. So what had whispered into our microphone during the eulogy? I made a decision I'm not proud of. I edited the whispers out of the recording. I isolated the audio, removed the 3 instances of the whisper, smoothed over the waveforms to make it seamless. The edited version sounded perfect, Just the brother's eulogy, clear and uninterrupted, nothing unusual, nothing disturbing. I sent the finished video to the family. They thanked me, said it was beautiful, said it helped them feel like they'd been there. The overseas daughter wrote me a personal note expressing her gratitude. I should have felt good about that, but I kept the original recording, the unedited version, with the whispers intact. I couldn't delete it. I needed to know it was real, that I hadn't imagined it. 2 weeks later, Gerald's brother called me. His voice was shaking. Ms. Park, I need to ask you something. During the service, during my eulogy, did you hear anything unusual? My throat went dry. What do you mean? A voice, a whisper. I didn't notice it at the time, but afterward, I kept thinking. I could have sworn I heard something while I was speaking. What did it say? He was quiet for a long moment. It said, "He's not in there," 3 times. I thought I was imagining it. I didn't know what to tell him. I couldn't lie, but I couldn't tell him the truth either. I didn't hear anything during the service, I said carefully, but our recordings sometimes pick up ambient sounds that we don't notice in the moment. Could you check? Could you listen to the recording and tell me if you hear it? I opened the original file, the unedited version. I listened to the 3 whispers again. Then I made a choice. I don't hear anything unusual, I lied. Just your eulogy. It was very moving. He thanked me and hung up. I sat in my office, staring at the audio file, and I thought about what Gerald's brother had said. That he'd heard the whisper too, that it had said the same thing, the same words I'd heard in the recording. He's not in there. I thought about what that meant, about why someone or something would whisper that during a funeral, about what it implied. I called the cemetery again, asked to speak to the manager. I told him I needed to verify something about Gerald Thompson's burial, that there might have been an error in our documentation. What kind of error? He asked. I need to confirm that the right body was buried, that we buried Gerald Thompson and not someone else. Silence on the other end. Then, Ms. Park, are you suggesting we made a mistake? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm asking if there's any way to verify. We verified the identification before burial. The family identified him. Everything was correct. But is there any way to be absolutely certain without exhuming? No. Once someone's buried, that's it. We don't open graves without a court order and extremely compelling evidence. I thanked him and hung up. I sat there for a long time, thinking about the whisper, about how certain it had sounded, about how it had appeared 3 times, as if it was important, as if someone needed the message heard. He's not in there. I still work at Harmony Memorial Services. I still record funerals for families, but I listen differently now. I pay attention to the audio, to the quiet spaces between words, to the sounds that shouldn't be there, but are. And I wonder, sometimes, about the other recordings I've made over the years, about what might be hidden in those files, whispered in moments when no one was paying attention, about how many times someone has tried to tell us something and we simply edited them out. The graveyard shift is named that for a reason. I'm Mateo, and I work the overnight maintenance shift at Riverside Cemetery. It's solitary work, Most people don't want to be in a cemetery at 3 a.m., but someone has to keep the place maintained. I handle the work that's too disruptive during the day: irrigation repairs, pathway maintenance, equipment servicing. The pay's good, and I don't mind the quiet. Riverside's been around since the 1920s, so we've got everything from old mausoleums to modern burial gardens. It's a big property, 70 acres, with a single mausoleum building near the center. Most of my work is outdoors, but sometimes I need to check the mausoleum too, make sure the climate control is working, that there's no water damage, that the interior lighting is functioning. I've been doing this shift for 5 years. I know every pathway, every section, every shadow. I know what normal looks like at 3 a.m. I know the difference between expected sounds, wind in the trees, animals moving through the brush, and sounds that don't belong. On a Tuesday night in early December, I was doing my usual rounds. I'd parked my utility truck near the maintenance shed and was walking the perimeter, checking irrigation lines. It was cold, clear, with enough moonlight to see without a flashlight. I like nights like that: peaceful, quiet, just me and the work. I was near the eastern fence line, about a quarter mile from the mausoleum, when I saw them. Footprints in the dew, fresh footprints, leading from the mausoleum toward the front gates. I stopped and examined them. They were clear, adult-sized, probably a man's shoes based on the size and shape. The dew was thick that night, and the prints were distinct, each one showing the tread pattern of a dress shoe. My first thought was trespasser. Sometimes people climb the fence, either looking for a place to sleep or doing something more criminal. I followed the prints, tracking them across the grass. They led in a straight line from the mausoleum to the front gates, maybe 300 yards. Then they stopped right at the edge of the pavement where the cemetery property ended and the public road began. The footprints just stopped, not faded, not scattered, just stopped, like whoever made them had simply walked to the edge of the property and evaporated. I examined the area carefully. The gates were still locked. I checked them myself. The fence showed no signs of climbing or damage. The prints didn't loop back into the cemetery or continue along the road. They just ended. I walked back to the mausoleum, following the prints in reverse. They led directly to the main entrance, a large bronze door that's kept locked at night. I tried the handle, locked, same as it should be. I pulled out my keys and unlocked it, stepping inside. The mausoleum is climate controlled, always kept at a steady 65 degrees to preserve the crypts. It's quiet inside, just the hum of the HVAC system and the soft echo of footsteps on marble. I clicked on my flashlight and checked the interior. Everything looked normal. The crypts were sealed. The memorial plaques were undisturbed. The flowers left by families were in their usual places. I checked the floors for any sign of the footprints continuing inside. Nothing. The marble was clean, no moisture, no tracks. I stepped back outside, locked the door, and examined the ground. The footprints definitely originated from the mausoleum entrance. They started right at the threshold, no prints leading to the door, just prints leading away from it. I stood there for a while, trying to rationalize what I was seeing. Maybe someone had exited the mausoleum before I'd started my shift, before the dew had settled, but the prints were fresh. I could tell by how clear they were, how the moisture was still undisturbed around them. I documented it with my phone, took photos of the prints, the route they followed, the place where they stopped. Then I continued my rounds. I had work to do, and standing around staring at footprints wasn't going to get it done. The next night, same thing. I arrived at 11 p.m., started my rounds at midnight. By 3 a.m., when the dew was heaviest, I walked past the mausoleum. Fresh footprints, same pattern. Starting at the mausoleum door, leading in a straight line to the front gates, stopping at the pavement. This time, I followed them immediately. I checked the mausoleum door. Locked. I unlocked it, checked inside, nothing disturbed. I locked it again and stood there, watching the footprints glisten in the moonlight. They were real, they weren't my imagination. Someone, or something, was walking from the mausoleum to the gates every night, leaving clear tracks in the dew. I decided to stake it out. On the third night, I parked my truck near the mausoleum and waited. I positioned myself where I could see both the entrance and the path leading to the gates. I sat there from midnight until 4 a.m., watching. Nothing. No one entered or exited the mausoleum. No movement, no sounds, nothing. But when I got out at 4:15 to check, the footprints were there. Same pattern, same route. Fresh tracks in the dew, starting at the door I'd been watching for 4 hours. I'd been looking right at the area where they should have appeared, and I'd seen nothing. No person, no shadow, no movement. But the prints were there. I called my supervisor the next morning, told him what I'd been seeing. He listened without interrupting, then asked me to send him the photos. I did. He called back an hour later. Come to the office, he said. I need to show you something. I drove to the administrative building. He had the cemetery records pulled up on his computer, the mausoleum directory specifically. He scrolled through the names, stopped on one entry. Marcus Delacroix, he said. Crypt 27, interred March 15, 1958. Died March 13, 1958, age 52. Why are you showing me this? He pulled up a newspaper article dated March 14, 1958. The headline read, Local Man Dies Attempting to Walk Home. I read the article. Marcus Delacroix had suffered a heart attack while visiting a friend's house about 3 miles from his home. Instead of calling for help, he'd tried to walk back home. He'd made it about half a mile before collapsing on the side of the road. He died there, alone, trying to get home. His family had him interred at Riverside, my supervisor said, Crypt 27, which is near the main entrance of the mausoleum. And you think? I think he's still trying to walk home. He closed the article. The footprints start at his crypt and follow the most direct route toward where he lived, which would be west of the cemetery, past the front gates. The prints stop at the property line because that's as far as he can go. I sat there, processing this. So every night, he walks from his crypt to the gates, trying to get home? That's my theory. It's been happening for years, according to the old maintenance logs. Different night workers have reported the same thing. Footprints in the dew, always the same route, always stopping at the gates. Why didn't anyone tell me? Because most people quit after they see it. They get scared, they leave, they don't come back. I figured you'd notice eventually, and if you stuck around, I'd explain. I went back that night for my shift. I did my usual rounds, but this time I paid attention to the mausoleum. At 3 a.m., I walked to Crypt 27, third row, left side, bronze plaque with Marcus's name and dates. I stood in front of it for a moment, then spoke quietly. Mr. Delacroix, I'm sorry you didn't make it home. I'm sorry you died on the road, but you're not on the road anymore. You're here, at rest. You don't need to keep walking. I didn't expect a response. I just said it and left. At 4 a.m., I checked the grounds. The footprints were there, same as every night. Starting at the mausoleum, leading to the gates, stopping at the pavement. But they were different. Instead of going straight to the gates, they veered slightly, took a path that led past a bench near the main pathway. The prince stopped at the bench, then continued to the gates. I walked to the bench. Someone had sat there recently. The dew was disturbed, and there were faint impressions on the wooden seat. I sat down in the same spot, looking at the view. From here, you could see the front gates clearly, could see the road beyond. It was a good place to rest, a good place to sit and look at the distance you still had to travel. I go to work every night at Riverside Cemetery. I do my rounds, maintain the grounds, keep everything running. And every night at 3 a.m., I check the footprints. They're always there, starting at the mausoleum, stopping at the bench for a while, then continuing to the gates. Marcus Delacroix is still trying to walk home. He's been trying for 67 years, and he'll probably keep trying for 67 more. But at least now, he has a place to rest along the way. At least now, someone knows where he's going. Even if he never gets there, even if the road home ends at a locked gate and an empty stretch of pavement where the living world begins and the dead can go no further.